Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Last Dinner Party album from the Pyre. From the Pyre is the second album from the English pop rock band The Last Dinner Party, and already a very soon follow-up to their debut from last year, Prelude to Ecstasy, which is an album that I really did enjoy when it came out, and I do find it still to be a very refreshing take on modern pop rock. There are just a lot of things that I think make it such a unique album. I do particularly love a lot of the very grand orchestral elements that the album has, as well as just the general writing and performances being absolutely amazing. And so having the follow-up to the debut being so soon, only about a year and a half later, was definitely quite unexpected. But despite that, I do find this album to be a really solid follow-up with a lot of just the same things that I love about their debut also being very present on this album too. Just everything from the very smooth production but still managing to come through with a lot of really powerful and passionate moments, as well as of course the amazing vocals. And one of my favorite aspects about their debut, like I've already mentioned, being the orchestral elements, is also something that is really great to see being used quite a fair bit on this album too. I do really like the way that this album kicks off with Angus Day, as you have these almost operatic style vocals with the very grand instrumentation and just gives it a very epic feel. And I think that this track does just do an amazing job at not only building on the sound that they established on their first album, but then also setting the tone for this album really well as well. And then just of course the general progression of the song as it builds towards a very epic climax, which is something that a lot of the songs on this album I think actually do really well. As just outside of a handful of the tracks that are kind of there as more breathers than anything, nearly every song does this, and I think all of them do it at least reasonably well. And then I do also love the next song, Count the Waves, which I think has this incredible sense of mystery in the guitar playing during the opening, and I think that just that vibe is reflected really well in everything else that's happening in the song as well. I do also then really like the almost dreamlike kind of style that the pre-chorus has to it. And then while the chorus is pretty much just like average standard pop rock, I think that they still just about managed to incorporate a bit more of that mysterious kind of sound into it. That was one of my favorite things about the intro of the song. And I think that it overall does manage to make this song very theatrical. I think that just the general diversity in the styles that they show on this song is just used so well. And then you have Second Best, which attempts to go for a more traditional pop rock kind of style, just without the theatrics that the Last Dinner Party would typically be using in their music. And I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with this song. I think that it's just a bit of a sudden change in style after obviously the much more epic two opening songs, and then just going into this I think is just a bit weird. It does then, like I've said, have a pretty good build up towards the end. However, I think that the lack of tension building in the first half makes the climax seem a little bit pointless, and ultimately just isn't quite as satisfying as many of the others on the album, just given that it never really felt like it was going to do that from the start of the song. But the next song, This Is the Killer Speaking, is quite possibly my favorite song on the album, as it shows off some of the absolute most anthemic vocals on the project with such power and such passion at every moment, particularly during the chorus, which is obviously one of the best moments on the song and feels like an extremely satisfying release after the much slower but still very tense verses. And then of course you have just the amazing epic ending that this song has too, as it really does just come together in just one big epic climax with all the strings and orchestral arrangements all coming together right at the end, and I think is such an amazing and satisfying ending to a song that was already amazing to begin with. And then I think that Rifle is a pretty solid follow-up to that, as it starts off just being really quiet and really chill, which I think is generally the best way to follow on from a song like This Is the Killer Speaking. However, I do wish that Rifle committed just a little bit more to being that kind of a song, as it does have moments where it does get a little bit louder, and again, it's just another one of those where they're not actually necessarily bad moments, but it's just that coming off of arguably the most epic song on the album, they just sound a little bit lackluster in comparison. And I do also find that the lack of structure that this song has, as the louder moments are a bit all over the place, does actually end up making it come across as quite messy, I think. Then after that you have Woman is a Tree, which I think is the exact kind of slow burner song I would have been looking for after This Is the Killer Speaking. I do just love how this song is very consistent and never really has a big epic climax, but it really just doesn't need one, as it still manages to create so much suspense and tension in the sound and the atmosphere that it does have, as it really does just feel like one of the most intense songs on the album, even though it is so slow and quiet. And then I think that the latter half of the song is also really unique with the almost a cappella type of sound, as it does go for a much more vocal kind of focus. I Hold Your Anger is a song I do really like for its acoustic intro, and then also just the way it manages to remain true to that sound for pretty much the whole song, even if it does incorporate some slightly less acoustic acoustic instruments later on. I think that the piano playing on this song is incredible. I absolutely love the piano playing on this song, as well as the very brief moments that do have much grander sounding instrumentation, that as few and far between as these moments are, it does make each one just feel that much more impactful. And then, like I've already mentioned, you do have these brief moments where you have slightly less acoustic leading instrumentation, but I think it's blended in with the rest of the acoustic sounds really well, as the song still manages to remain true to wanting to sound acoustic, but still managing to blend in other sounds really tastefully. And then Sail Away, I think, is simply put just a good continuation of that, with this one committing a lot more to the more stripped back and acoustic sound being pretty much just vocals and piano for the whole song. And I think it being sandwiched between two much bigger and more epic songs does make it feel just a little bit lacking, which I think is a real shame because its placement on the album doesn't do this song justice, because it is really good. Just being so incredibly performed, with both the vocals and the piano both being absolutely top notch and really giving a chance for both of them to really show off what they can do without being diluted by anything else. And I think it's just a shame that even though the elements within the song don't feel diluted, the song as a whole definitely is, especially as then the next song, The Scythe, is just another one of the most epic and grand moments that the album has to offer. I absolutely love the atmosphere on this track and just the general performance, as every time the song does another cycle, it adds something else that manages to bring so much depth to the sound. Of course, like many of these songs, with the orchestral arrangements in particular being one of my absolute favorites. And I think that just the amount of passion and emotion on this track as well are at their absolute best. And even the guitar solo towards the end of the song is also one of my favorite moments, being quite an unexpected direction to take, given the lack of prominent guitar solos across the rest of the album, but they just managed to use it so well, as unexpected as it is. And then I think that the closing song, Inferno, just follows on from that really well, and ultimately does just give the album a really good ending. It has that same very passionate atmosphere that I absolutely love, but in such a way that manages to just keep it low-key enough to still give it a really soft and quiet ending. But that's definitely not to say that this song doesn't have its moments of being incredibly passionate, because it definitely does, as in some moments it does manage to deliver some incredibly passionate vocal performances in particular. And I think that despite the harsh contrast of this song of the more passionate moments, but ultimately being quite a chill ending, it still just manages to sound really good overall. And so outside of some quite inconsistent pacing on this project, I find it to be a really good follow-up to their already fantastic debut, as they still manage to pull through with a lot of their best and most epic and most passionate moments that they've done so far, with many of the individual songs on this album being some of my absolute favorite of the year, as they really are slowly but surely expanding their sound and exploring a lot more styles on this project, while they're continuing a lot of the orchestral themes that I love, but going even a bit more acoustic in some moments too, which I think is really cool. And so for that reason, I'll be giving this album a 7 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.